be seated. The children are dismissed to Children's Church. I really wanted to read all of 18 and 19. I may talk about all of 18 and 19 because it's kind of one story. We're trying to push to the end of 2 Samuel, and then we'll probably move to a New Testament. Might even go to a gospel next. We haven't done one in several years. But we are wrapping up the life of David as we come to the end of 2 Samuel. One might say this is the culmination of David's failure coming back to haunt him. But at the same time, there are great lessons to learn from David in this passage. And there are unfortunate lessons to learn from Absalom. I'm going to say there's an unfortunate lesson to learn from Joab, though I noted that most of the commentators didn't agree with me, but that's never stopped me before. So let's read the passage. Then David mustered the men who were with him and set over them commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds. And David sent out the army, 1/3 under the command of Joab, 1/3 under the command of Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, and Joab's brother, and 1/3 under the command of Ittai the Gittite. And if you've forgotten, that means he is a Philistine. A Gittite is a Philistine. In fact, it's a Philistine from Gath, the same place Goliath is from. And the king said to the men, I myself will also go out with you. But the men said, you shall not go out, for if we flee, they will not care about us. If half of us die, they will not care about us. But you are worth 10,000 of us. Therefore, it is better that you send us help from the city. And the king said to them, whatever seems best to you, I will do. So the king stood at the side of the gate, while all the army marched out by hundreds and by thousands. And the king ordered Joab and Abishai and Ittai, deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom. And all the people heard when the king gave orders to all the commanders about Absalom. So the army went out into the field against Israel, and the battle was fought in the forest of Ephraim. And the men of Israel were defeated there by the servants of David, and the loss there was great on that day, 20,000 men. The battle spread over the face of all the land. I don't like country there because it's that great word Eretz, the promised land. Over all the land, and I think that it's significant that it uses that word. And the forest devoured more people that day than the sword. So if you are a big Tolkien fan, and you love Lord of the Rings, and you wonder where he got the idea of a forest fighting a battle, here it is. God came up with it before Tolkien, because it literally is saying this too, guys. It is actually saying the forest and the land went to battle for the king. And the reason why Absalom's army was defeated was not brilliance on David's part, was not because his men were mighty men of valor and great warriors, and Absalom's men were not very, experienced warriors. No, the reason why David's army won is because God fought against them, not just with the soldiers, but with the forest and the land. Remember, there's a verse in the couple verses that we should think of before we even go past this. One verse that says this, that if you honor your father and mother, you will live long in the land. Well, Absalom is not honoring his father. And there is another verse that talks about that when you are in rebellion against God, the land will what? Spit you out. That's what's happening here. The land is spitting Absalom out. And the forest, if the rocks can sing Jesus' praises as he comes in to Jerusalem, if humans don't, well, then, my goodness, God should have no trouble at all making trees fight for him. And so more people died that day because of the forest than they did because of a sword. And Absalom happened to meet the servants of David. Absalom just happened to meet the servants of David. Here's a huge, and notice, where's the battle being taken place? It says, over all of the land. This is not a battle that's in one little tiny spot. It is spread out over all of the land. And let me say this too, because I do see David's skill at work in this battle. Notice it's the forest of Ephraim. Guys, Ephraim is on the west side of the Jordan River. Mahanaim, where David is way, not just on the east side of the Jordan River, he's as far east as you can get and still be in Palestine. Jerusalem is just a few miles on the west side of the Jordan River. The reason why this is important is because it tells us that though Absalom gathered this army, he actually never had a chance to go and pursue David and take David where David was. David didn't let him. This battle was not fought by Mahanaim outside of it. It wasn't fought in the area of Gilead, which is also on the east side of the Jordan, where many battles are fought. Where is it fought? In the forests of Ephraim. And how did it get fought there? Because David didn't wait for Absalom to come to him. David put his army in 3 units, and he went on the offensive. He sent his army to catch Absalom before they crossed the Jordan. And why did he do that? Because he knew he was vastly outnumbered. And he had to catch that army still in the hill country of Ephraim, where there are forests and things that make for guerrilla fighting. Because if he catches that army out in a big, huge field, or in the plains of Megiddo or something like that, except for God would give him the victory no matter how it happens, David is thinking, I can't match them in that situation. So he sends them across the Jordan, and they attack them in the hill country of Ephraim, in the forests of Ephraim. And then as a result, the army of Absalom is in confusion, and they are spreading out all over Israel. They're basically fleeing and going home. And just by chance, we are told that Absalom runs into the servants of David. And Absalom was riding on his mule, and the mule went under the thick branches of a great oak. And his head caught fast in the oak, and he was suspended between heaven and earth, while the mule that was under him went on. Now, before we go farther here, I don't want to disappoint all the Sunday school teachers throughout the years. But what's missing in this passage, you Sunday school teachers who've taught children, who have your little Sunday school sheets with pictures of this very story? There is nothing about his hair in this story. Yet, if I would have asked those of you who are familiar with this story, how did Absalom die? You would say, he got his hair caught in a tree, and then somebody threw a spear through him. Actually, that's not what the text says. He got his head caught in a tree. Most likely, the oak branches trapped his neck and caught his head there, and he was hanging there. There is nothing mentioned about the hair. That is speculated even as early, as the Jewish people speculated on it, not even much longer after this, a few hundred years, even before the time of Christ. But that's actually not a part of the story. But it just goes to show it's become part of our canon. I, as a kid, was taught that. I was shocked. I had to go back and actually look and say, wait a minute, it doesn't say hair here anywhere? It doesn't say hair here anywhere. His head is caught, and his mule takes off. But I want you to see something here. I want you to see the contrast between David. David says, and I myself will lead you out in battle. I'm glad David said that, Because David has gotten him, in fact, this whole situation wouldn't be happening if David had gone out and led them in battle instead of staying home. This wouldn't even be happening. You would not have had the situation of David and Bathsheba. And everything after that is a result, a consequence of that sinful act. So good for David. He says, I myself will lead you in battle. Because that's what he should be doing. Now, his men say to him, no, you won't be. And their logic is actually pretty good here. Their whole point is this: David, if you go into battle, the opposing army will completely ignore us. You will actually put us in danger because they don't even care about us. They're going to all focus on you. So anybody around you, they're going to be in trouble. You're actually going to create problems for us by being present. And so then they say to David, we want you to stay behind in the city where you're well protected and you can send reinforcements. And on top of that, David, you are worth more than 10,000 men to us. That's David and his army. Look at the way his men think about him. Do you notice what's also missing in this story? Yeah, Absalom's hair is missing, but there is not another person with him. How did this happen? How is it that Absalom, I'm assuming, is fleeing from the battle, and he is all alone? Because let's be honest, guys, if Absalom has men with him and he gets caught in a tree, I don't care if the mule abandons him, which is what happens. Even the mule abandoned him. Wouldn't there be men there to help him get out of the tree, to bring him down and take him to safety? This passage is intentionally trying to create a contrast. Absalom has set his face against the Lord's anointed. And when you do that, you die alone. And this man is going to die alone. This man who has been described to us in the past several chapters as the most popular man in all of Israel. This man who is handsome. This man who has charisma. This man who people just flock to and listen to. They come to have him make judgments for them because he's such a slick tongue that he has. This man who apparently doesn't have a single friend in the world. And why is that? Because, when the going gets tough, popular people, their friends get going. David has real friends, real loyal followers. Even his generals, as bad as Joab is, you can't get a man more loyal to him, at least on some level. But Absalom has nothing. He is going to die alone. And even his mule abandons him and just keeps on going. And a certain man saw it and told Joab, behold, I saw Absalom hanging in an oak. And Joab said to the man who told him, What? What? You saw him? Why then did you not strike him there to the ground? I would have been glad to give you 10 pieces of silver and a belt. I think this next line is really crucial to how we interpret the story and why I think most commentators get it wrong. Most commentators think David is in the wrong and Joab is in the right. I don't know why they think that. Joab is almost never in the right, especially in an issue like this. Yes, David can be in the wrong, but I feel like David is starting to ascend the mountain again here. But the man said to Joab, even if I felt in my hand the weight of 1,000 pieces of silver, I would not reach out my hand against the king's son, for in our hearing the king commanded you and Abishai and Ittai, for my sake protect the young man Absalom. I do a lot of study in sort of narrative reading and how people write. You can learn a lot about what a narrator instills in a character. If I asked you the question, that man who we don't know his name, we just have that comment by him, would you say that the narrator is presenting him positively or negatively? Absolutely positively. We look at that guy and we admire him immediately. Why? Because he says, Man, I don't care if you gave me 1,000 pieces of silver. I am not touching Absalom because I heard what David said. Soon as that man is characterized as positively for his attitude in a narrative, it tells me what the narrator's opinion is of somebody who does the opposite of him. Joab does the opposite of this guy. Don't tell me Joab is doing the right thing. And don't tell me that the narrator thinks he's doing the right thing. And by narrator, I mean the Holy Spirit as well. Because the narrator is writing from a perspective of the Spirit. The Spirit is not, in fact, if anything is going on here, the narrator is contrasting what Joab should have been and who he was. And notice another little twist on Joab. If you want to make Joab good, then explain the next line that this guy makes here. He says, I wouldn't touch him because I heard him say to you guys, for my sake, protect the young man Absalom. On the other hand, if I had done what you wanted me to do and dealt treacherously, he sees it as treacherously, against his life, and there is nothing hidden from the king, in other words, and David found out about it, come on, Joab, admit it. You yourself would have stood aloof and not said one word in support of me. You would have let David hang me for it. What does that tell you about Joab? His own men know his character. His own men know his character. And what is his character? You wanted me to kill him for you so that you could act as if you did nothing wrong. Well, I'm not doing it for you, Joab. You're going to have to do it yourself if you want him dead. And that's exactly what happens. Joab said, I will not waste time like this with you. And he took 3 javelins in his hand and thrust them into the heart of Absalom while he was still alive in the oak. Possibly. That word in Hebrew can mean a spear. It also can just mean a stick. And notice, you would think if somebody drove 3 javelins into Absalom's midsection while he's hanging in a tree, you would think that would kill him. But notice what it goes on to say here. And 10 young men, Joab's armor bearers, surrounded Absalom and struck him and killed him. They didn't kill him. Joab's 10 armor bearers killed him. So some have suggested actually what's happening here is Joab took these 3 stout sticks and he kept using them to try to knock Absalom out of the tree. And he knocked Absalom out of the tree to fall to the ground, and then he ordered his young men, his armor bearers, to kill him. Notice, once again, this is a trick of Joab's. I'm not going to kill the king's son. I'm free. I just ordered my armor bearers to do it. He's making himself once removed from this act so that just in case David loses it, which Joab knows he can, he's got some type of defense, some kind of appeal. It also shows you something about Joab's character. Then this is a positive thing in Joab's character, but it's positive in the same way that Ahithophel has a positive thing in his character. Remember, Ahithophel was the counselor who told Absalom, look, give me 12,000 men, I'll go kill David. All we have to do is kill one guy. We don't have to kill anybody else. Let me just kill one guy and then the whole kingdom will come to you. And Ahithophel's ignored, and Absalom goes with Hushai's advice, which is, bring up the whole army and kill all the people with David. Of course, Ahithophel, my gosh, that devastated him because that means Bathsheba, that means Solomon, his grandson, his great-grandson, his granddaughter, his great-grandson, and many other of the people that he knows and is friends with, they're all going to be killed because Absalom is acting like a king of this world. You do not leave any of your rivals alive. I really think that passage, when Hushai gives that advice and Absalom says, we're going to do it this way, you need to read it fully. I think Absalom's intent is, I am going to kill every last son of David. Every last potential heir to the throne. No one is going to be able to challenge me. That's Absalom's intent, which tells you a little bit about Absalom and his wickedness. Joab, like Ahithophel, recognizes once Absalom's dead, we do not need to keep on killing our brothers. So he says here, then Joab blew the trumpet, and the troops came back from pursuing Israel, for Joab restrained them. This does no one any good for us to keep butchering our own brethren, our fellow Israelites. He should have kept that in mind. And they took Absalom and threw him into a great pit in the forest and raised over him a very great heap of stones. This happens several times in the Old Testament, and in every case, it happens to somebody who's bad. Achan was killed and had a heap of stones piled up over him as a reminder to Israel of his wickedness. The king of Ai was killed and had a heap of stones piled up on top of him as a reminder of their defiance against Israel. And here we have it happening with Absalom. And there's a very interesting thing that is added to this. So Absalom is killed, and this giant pile of stones is thrown on top of him. And all Israel fled, everyone to his own home. Now Absalom, in his lifetime, had taken and set up for himself the pillar that is in the king's valley, for he said, I have no son to keep my name in remembrance. And he called the pillar after his own name, and it is called Absalom's monument to this day. Why are we told this here? This has nothing to do with this battle. It doesn't even have anything to do with what's going on at this moment in time. But we are told at this point, oh, by the way, there's another monument to Absalom, because it's put right next to this one. There's a pile of stones that has been piled up on this man's grave that is serving as a monument to Absalom. Then it lets us know, but there is another monument to Absalom that Absalom himself made. In his own lifetime, he took and set up for himself a pillar, a monument that is in the king's valley. For he said, I have no son to keep my name in remembrance. And he called the pillar after his own name. He called it Absalom's pillar. And it is still there to this day. Why does the narrator want us to see this? There's only one answer I can even think of. Because he wants to contrast the monument Absalom set up for himself and the monument God left for him. Now, just as a word of warning, we should get it out there before somebody makes a mistake. Do you know how many people in the Bible set up monuments for themselves? A lot. It never ends well, ever. Not one single time does it end well for a person who sets up a monument for themselves. The Bible always sees this as total foolishness. And they are always exposed for their arrogance and pride. So don't be planning on building any monuments for yourselves. That's not a good idea. This passage tells us God will build a monument for the man who builds a monument for himself. A pile of stones. Do you guys know where Absalom's pillar is today? Of course you don't, because it doesn't exist. In fact, it didn't even exist much longer than the time of the writing of this book. It vanished. Do you know that you can go to the pile of stones that is the monument of Absalom's grave? It's still there today. At least potentially. It's called that. It's hard to know for certain, but Israel for hundreds of years has considered it that. Do you realize that for the several hundred years, Israelites, when they walk by that pile of stones, pick up a stone and throw it on top of it to agree in the condemnation of Absalom's for his rebellion against his father? Do you know that in Israel today, they take classes of school children to that pile of rocks. And I'll tell you what they have them recite. This is what they recite at that pile of rocks. Kids are taken to this pile of rocks and they say this: "Cursed be the memory of rebellious Absalom, and cursed forever be all wicked children that rise up in rebellion against their parents." Now that is what I call a field trip. I mean, could you see us doing that in our schools? That is a field trip, man. Let's teach them early on the mistake of disobeying and rebelling against your parents. But do you see the significance of this? Absalom built for himself a monument, and it's been forgotten. But his sin has not been forgotten. His rebellion has not been forgotten. And the judgment of God upon his life has not been forgotten. Well, that should scare the living daylights out of everybody. The thing that can encourage us is, I think it's Isaiah 56, that God says he will make a pillar, a monument for a person, and set it in his throne room, and he will be remembered forever. I only really have one more thing to say about this passage. Can you believe that? I don't know how long it's going to take me to say it, but really only have one thing. As we have gone through David's life, this man has taught us an awful lot about grieving. He has taught us about how to mourn people. But the strange thing about David teaching us how to mourn people, other than his infant child who died, and the mourning that he does for that infant child, the other passages where David grieves are all about his enemies. So let's read this, because this is another time where David mourns for his enemy. Now, it's also his son, but it's also his enemy. Then Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok, said, "Let me run and carry news to the king that the Lord has delivered him from the hand of his enemies." And Joab said to him, "You are not to carry the news today." Joab is no dummy. Joab has had at least two other experiences where people have came to bring good news to David, news they thought was good, that David did not take as good news, and those people ended up dead. The first time, it was when Saul died. And somebody thought, an Amalekite brought good news today. Saul, your enemy's dead. He ended up dead. The second time was Ishbosheth, Saul's son. And two men came and brought news that they had killed him. Well, that was not a good move. Joab is no dummy. He may have all kinds of things wrong. His character is flawed, but he is no dummy. He knows Ahimaaz. This is Zadok's son. I'm like, oh, no, you're not. You are not going to carry news today. You may carry news another day, but not today. You shall carry no news, because the king's son is dead. And you might think it's good news you're taking to him, but Joab knows it's not going to be good news to David, which tells you that Joab knows absolutely that what he has done is going to make David very, very angry. Then Joab said to the Cushite. Cush is a little bit south of Egypt in modern-day Ethiopia. I only bring this up because I coach cross country, and there's a line coming here that's almost an impossibility apart from God intervening. Then Joab said to the Cushite, "Go tell the king what you have seen." And the Cushite bowed before Joab and ran. An Ethiopian runner, running. And he's going to run about 30 miles to get from this forest to Mahanaim. That's a long ways. That's farther than the marathon run. "Go tell the king what you've seen." And the Cushite bowed before Joab and ran. And then Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok, said again to Joab, "Come what may, let me also run after the Cushite." And Joab said, "Why will you run, my son, seeing that you will have no reward for the news?" Well, he might have a reward, but not the one he wants. Come what may, he said, I will run. So he said to him, run. And then Ahimaaz ran by way of the plain and outran the Cushite. A Jewish boy just outran an Ethiopian in a long-distance race. That would take an act of God. I'm sorry. That's got to be a miracle. Or a shortcut. Maybe he found a shortcut, but I just don't see that. That's the last time a Jewish boy has ever beat an Ethiopian in a distance race. But Ahimaaz has done it. Now, David was sitting between the two gates, and the watchman went up to the roof of the gate by the wall. And when he lifted up his eyes and looked, he saw a man running alone. And the watchman called out and told the king. And the king said, if he's alone, there is news in his mouth. And he drew nearer and nearer. And the watchman saw another man running. And the watchman called to the gate and said, see another man running alone. And the king said, he also brings news. And the watchman said, I think the running of the first is like the running of Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok. And the king said, he is a good man and comes with good news. Good news, gospel news. Then Ahimaaz cried out to the king, all is well. And he bowed before the king with his face to the earth and said, blessed be the Lord your God, who has delivered up the men who raised their hand against my lord the king. And the king said, is it well with the young man Absalom? And Ahimaaz answered, when Joab sent the king's servant, your servant, I saw a great commotion, but I do not know what it was. That's a lie. How do I know that's a lie? Because a lot of people think maybe he just didn't see it. Okay, maybe he didn't know how Absalom died, but what was Joab's last words to him? You don't want to bring this news because the king's son is dead. Don't tell me this guy doesn't know Absalom is dead. What this tells me is maybe on the run, maybe before Joab let him go, he said just one thing. You might not want to tell David his son is dead because you don't know how he's going to react. So he pretends like he doesn't know. And the king said, turn aside and stand here. So he turned aside and stood still, and behold, the Cushite came. And the Cushite said, good news again. Here with that good news again. For my lord the king, for the Lord has delivered you this day from the hand of all who rose up against you. Is it good news? Guys, it is good news. David has been delivered by the Lord against the one who rose up against him. But this is one great lesson from this passage. Guys, even today, the gospel is good news, but it's not good news for everybody. And there is a sadness even in the good news because people reject it. And not everyone is delivered. And we will see in this story that all things, this is good news for David, but not everything is good news for David. And the king said to the Cushite, is it well with the young man Absalom? It's funny how we write it. We have the hymn, it is well with my soul. After a man lost his children, God gave him peace. It sounds so close to that. It is well. Is it well? It's a question. Is it well with the young man Absalom? And the Cushite answered, may the enemies of my lord the king and all who rise up against you for evil be like that young man. And the king was deeply moved and went up to the chamber over the gate and wept. And as he went, he said, O my son Absalom, my son Absalom, would I had died instead of you. O Absalom, my son, my son. In the next section, which we won't read, Joab chews David out because of his grieving, of his mourning for his son. A mourning so deep that touched the nation so deeply that the victorious soldiers sleeked their way back into the city as if men fleeing a battle in shame. And Joab lets David have it because he thinks he's about to lose the nation because of his mourning. And I read commentary after commentary, and then even quotations from guys from 150 years ago that all sided with Joab. Let me tell you why I'm not going to side with Joab. When you have a civil war, if it's a civil war, guys, there is no real victory in a civil war. One side might win, but there is no victory. Brother has killed brother. Families have been torn apart. A nation is rent asunder. David is absolutely right to grieve, not just for Absalom, to grieve. To not celebrate. To celebrate this. What are you celebrating? You're celebrating that someone rose up and led half this nation astray, and it had to be brought to an end by the slaughter of 20,000 of our own family members. It was a necessary war. It had to happen. Judgment needed to fall. But to celebrate it? No, we don't celebrate that. Which is why I can't imagine why not one single commentator quoted Jeremiah or Ezekiel. God does not delight in the death of the wicked. God does not celebrate the death of those he pours out his judgment upon. That's not cause for celebration. That's cause for mourning. Yes, the gospel is good news. The good news is Jesus has offered a way that we can be delivered from the judgment of God. But many people will reject that way. And the judgment of God will fall on them. And do you think that God and the angels are celebrating any one single person, even Satan himself, that's being cast into the lake of fire? If you do, I don't think you know his character. And one of the reasons why I want to defend David here is because David is the only one acting like the son of David would act. He is mourning. He is mourning the loss of Absalom. He's mourning the loss of 20,000 of his own kingdom, Israelites from his own kingdom that have died. He is mourning a nation that's been rent asunder, who has been made weakened. And why is he mourning it? And we're given three reasons, and I'll end it with these three reasons. We can see three reasons. We're not really given it, but we can see them there. The first one is, he is mourning the loss of a son. But his son is wicked. Guys, look at this son has done just in recent days. He has raped 10 women who were the concubines of David. And not just did it, but did it publicly so that the whole nation could see with no shame. He has killed his brother Amnon. We might give him a pass for that, but we probably shouldn't, because he is not of a character that has the right to bring judgment upon Amnon. David should have done that. But he killed his brother Amnon for raping his sister Tamar. He has plotted against David ever since. You can see he is the first, what we would call another reference to the Lord of the Rings. Absalom is the first worm tongue. That's who he is. That's the character that he plays in this story. He is speaking evil into the hearts of Israel, trying to turn them against their king. But on top of that, after Ahithophel's advice is rejected, Absalom really shows his colors. He's going to be a king that wipes out his entire family. This man is wicked. But he's also David's son. A couple nights ago, we were over at Tim's house, and somebody reminded me where I said it. I said, "Who said that?" And I think it was Rosina said, "You said that." And I said, "No, I know I said it, but I stole it from somebody because nothing is original with me." And I was trying to remember who I stole it from, and it was Tim Keller. And it was Gracie that had brought it up about not making our enemies single-dimensional. Tim Keller has this great line that what we do with an enemy, and the reason why we don't forgive them, is we turn them into one-dimensional beings. But they're not. No human being is a one-dimensional being. They're multidimensional. How is it that David can mourn the loss of his son when his son is so wicked? I think we understand this. Guys, if you don't understand what it means to make a wicked person, a wrong person, an evil person, an enemy of yours, not to make them one-dimensional, imagine that that enemy is your son or your daughter, a child, your child. Because I don't know a single parent that's willing to turn their child into a one-dimensional being. We see it all of the time. When you have this person commit mass murder and they bring him in and there's their poor parents and they ask him, what in the world? Well, this is horrible what he did. But what's one of the first things out of the parent's mouth usually? They want to let you know that that's not all who their child was. He wasn't single-dimensional. There was more to him than that. There were things in him that's good. There are things to be grieved. There are things to feel loss. When David looked at Absalom, he didn't just see the rebellious son who wanted him dead. He saw the little boy that he bounced on his knee. He saw the life of this child. And there was all kinds of aspects of Absalom that are redeemable, that David wants to see redeemed. He wants to see him restored. He doesn't just want them to spare Absalom so he can go on being wicked. He wants them to spare Absalom to give Absalom more time to be redeemed, to be restored. Have you ever mourned your enemy because you wished they had more time to turn from their sin, to be restored to God, to be restored to you? Have you ever been sad that somebody died, still your enemy? Because now there's no opportunity for reconciliation to happen. That's what David was doing. He was mourning because reconciliation between him and his son had been lost. He was also mourning because of regret. A second reason why David mourns in this passage is because he recognizes something. Absalom is the product of David's own sin. David could not look at Absalom and not feel responsible for his wickedness. David could not but think, if I would have been different, well, we could start with this. If I would have just taken one wife and been obedient to God's original command, none of this would have ever happened. Well, that's for sure, because Absalom was the son of his second wife. David recognizes that his choices, his sinful choices throughout his life, has led to Absalom becoming who he is. And no bigger choice probably than his sin with killing Uriah and taking Uriah's wife in an adulterous relationship. Those two things alone, if you think about it, what did David teach his kids? When you're in trouble, one of the ways you get out of trouble is you kill the person that, is the problem. And what did Absalom do? He had a problem. He had a problem with his brother Amnon. How do you handle a problem? You kill it. Where did he learn that from? He learned that from Dad. David knew it. Guys, there's no way Absalom can die and David can celebrate, because David knows that at least part of it is his own fault. Guys, I think we need to learn to grieve. Grieve the death of the wicked. Grieve the death of enemies, because we have to recognize at least part of the reason why they're acting the way they're acting is our own fault. It's one of the reasons why I have the hardest time watching the news when it comes to the Middle East. It's a challenging thing to watch, because you know what we want? We want clear-cut bad guys. and clear-cut good guys so that we can feel really good when the clear-cut bad guys get killed and we can celebrate it. I have bad news for you guys. There's only one clear-cut good guy, and his name is Jesus Christ. That's it. All the rest are a bunch of sinners. And if you are so blind that you can't recognize that even the people that are the enemies of our country, that we share partial blame for why they feel the way they do about us, about other people, it's just not that simple. And I don't think we should be celebrating anything. What we should be doing is what David was doing. We should be mourning the effects of sin on this world. Sin that every human being has brought into God's wonderful, beautiful, and perfect creation. We should mourn it. When we see what happened to Gaza, we should mourn it. When we see what happened to the 3,000 Israelites that were killed, we should mourn it. These are not things that we create celebrations for. I think David figured it out. And he was not about to celebrate his own victory because he had regrets. He knew he had participated in bringing it about through his own sin. But finally, the last reason is David has a cry of loss, a cry of regret, but he has a cry of longing. Oh, Absalom, my son Absalom, oh, Absalom. If only I could have died in your place. It's a longing. David says, I wish it would have been me, Absalom. Maybe if I died earlier, you wouldn't have turned out the way you did. Maybe if God would have struck me down when I had sinned, you would have learned from that judgment and you would not have taken this road and you would have taken a different road. But I want to take it slightly differently. I want to take it almost prophetically as being given by the Spirit, and David didn't even know what he was saying. If only I could have died in your place, Absalom. But unfortunately, I couldn't die in your place because I need to die in my place. Because I am a sinner like you, Absalom. But if only, Absalom, there was one who could die in your place, who could die in my place, who doesn't need to die in his place because he's never done anything wrong. If only we had someone like that that could restore us, that would be something to celebrate. That would be something to rejoice. When death is defeated and evil is squashed by the one who can die in our place. David may not have known it, but he was prophetically speaking of another son of his who can die in Absalom's place and could die in David's place and has died in our place. And this we celebrate. We do not need to mourn at this table. This is a celebration because one has died in our place and has given us life. Let's pray and close with a song, and then you can join with us in a meal in the fellowship hall. Lord, we thank you for what David has reminded us. One has come and is worthy to die in our place because he is wholly innocent. No blemish, no sin, only a righteous man who takes our place. And for this we celebrate. We celebrate every time we come together that he has wiped away every tear of mourning with the victory he brings over death. Your Son, Jesus Christ, we praise. Amen.